Good afternoon. My name is Vikas. Welcome from London. Over the Christmas period, and I consider this to be that period, I'm really glad that there's a lot of us who are also sitting at home like I am, and engaging and working from home. But it also provides an opportunity to pick the brains of some of the smartest and wisest people around the world on various issues. Now, you see the at the bottom of the screen what today's topic is. The subject of EdTech is such an important subject that has come to the mainstream as a result of the pandemic that I wanted to actually pick someone's brains on actually what evidence is there that this stuff works. Of course, I can answer it in many different ways, but I'd rather get someone else's opinion. So for today's live stream, I'm delighted to invite Victoria Collis, who is the Interim Managing Director of the EdTech Hub, to join me. Victoria, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
And so tell us a little bit about the EdTech Hub. Let's start with that.
Sure. So the EdTech Hub is really a global research partnership dedicated to improving the amount of evidence, hard evidence out there about what works and also really importantly, what doesn't work in EdTech. And when we say EdTech, we mean EdTech for students, so the kinds of things that help students learn better, for education systems, so the kinds of things that help ministries and other administrators organize and finance education systems better, and also really crucially, and what I think we're going to be talking about today, how EdTech can work for teachers, both in the way they work with students and also in their own development.
And so when you say it's a research partnership, tell us more about that aspect of it and who's involved in this.
Sure. So we've been lucky enough to get some funding from the UK government and also the Gates Foundation and also the support of the World Bank. And what that's enabled us to do is to bring together a group of 6 quite different organisations to work together. So at one end of the scale, we have Cambridge University, one of the foremost universities in the world, and their record on researching, they have a very good education faculty, for example, speaks for itself. And then maybe at the other end of the scale, we've got some quite small organisations, including one called Brink, which is a London-based organisation that specialises in taking small grassroots ideas and innovations and helping the people delivering those things to really quite small numbers of students and teachers, and working through with them how to expand those and make them work more at scale. So we're taking quite a lot of different approaches to research.
And so when I look at, I live in London and you are from the UK, although you're not there at the moment. We have the Education Endowment Foundation that does a heck of a lot of research in this space. How does your work differ to organizations like that?
So the reason why the hub came about was really because, unlike other sectors where, a lot of development money flows, health is a really good example. There isn't a lot of really rigorous research in education. So the health system, because of the way that, things like drug trials work, health is really used to doing lots of experiments and trials. There's not so much in education. And then EdTech specifically is one of those areas where everybody over the years has got a little bit disillusioned, because so often people's idea of EdTech is, actually we need to buy a bunch of tablets or a bunch of computers or a bunch of smartphones and then everything will be fine. And as I think probably everybody tuning in today knows, it's really not as simple as that. So this is really about redressing that situation and really trying to drill down into what else we need to do to make EdTech work for us, because we shouldn't really be thinking about EdTech as anything more frightening in a way than something like a pen. A pen is a tool that we've all been using for generations as part of education, and actually a computer or a tablet should be no different.
And so it's really interesting. Thank you for that background. But tell me, what do we know about the use of EdTech today? I mean, given the circumstances that we've gone through and are going through, are we any wiser as to the use of it?
Well, it's been a really interesting year for this, hasn't it? Because we've all rather unexpectedly found ourselves plunged into a situation where, going to school to teach or to learn has not, or to university as well, but going to school to teach or to learn has not been available to us, and it's not been available to us really quite suddenly. And I know many of my friends and colleagues in education systems around the world have been confronted with a big problem about what to do to make sure that children keep learning and teachers can keep teaching. And what we've seen is a really broad range of responses. So a lot of governments, for example, tried to keep in place exactly what they were doing before, just translating it from the classroom to online, which of course has presented all sorts of problems because not everyone can get online. As I'm sure many people here today have found out for themselves, teaching online is a very different thing from teaching in a classroom. And very often, many of your students may not be able to get online. So one of the things we've really been focusing on this year is about making sure that people make use of all the different kinds of education technology available to them, and not just fixating on really high-tech responses where, in situations where those are not possible. We've seen some great work, for example, in places like Kenya and Sierra Leone, where people are really making good use of much older technologies like radio, for example. And we've also seen a lot of use of these devices, lots and lots of use of text messaging and apps like WhatsApp, which are sometimes much easier for people to access than really high-tech stuff.
And so, Victoria, when I think about EdTech, is this just hype that's been created by the tech companies in terms of to sell their products and services?
Yeah, I think it's very easy to feel as if it might be that way. And I know that I myself have sat in meetings in ministries around the world when I've been working for education ministers and their teams, and smart people from smart companies come in and try and sell smart technology, and we all sit there and wonder how they think that we're possibly going to be able to afford that. So I can absolutely see how that view has grown up. What I will say is that there are tech companies out there who are doing their very best to join up with people like us and some of the big donors and some of the big foundations and the other people who are trying to make technology more accessible to children and teachers and children's families in lower income countries. Some of them are really, really trying hard to be responsible global citizens in that area. I mean, as I mentioned at the beginning, the Gates Foundation is one of the EdTech Hub's funders, but I completely see where that conception comes from.
And so, given that, again, one of the things that I did in a previous life was to think about setting up and set up a corporate VC that invests in EdTech. And the thing that I always was bemused by was, people didn't really understand the need to create the right ecosystem around EdTech. And so, what do you see about that?
Yeah, again, this is a really interesting one for me in my current job and in my previous job in working in education ministries. This is one of those moments where, in order to take full advantage of new technologies and how they can do things like improve situations where children can learn at their own speed and in their own way through kind of various personalized learning applications, for example. In order to do that, you need to make sure that that everyone has connectivity, that everyone has access to devices. And it's very clear to me that that is not something that education ministries can fix on their own. They need to be working across government. They need to be working with the planning department. They need to be working with the finance department. They probably need to be working with the capital works department, whatever that's called in all of your countries. These are not problems that can be solved in isolation. And that kind of cross-government collaboration is really, really difficult to get going anywhere in the world. And I think what we're actually seeing is more and more pockets of people starting to solve some of these problems for themselves. And I know when we were talking a little bit before the broadcast today, you were telling me a little bit about some of the amazing things that some of the teachers that you're working with now have been doing in their different corners of the world, and how we're all using technology today to come together to share ideas. And this kind of technology opens up all sorts of possibilities without it having to be a big, organized, top-down sort of a thing. I think the possibilities for the grassroots are probably better than they've ever been.
You're absolutely correct. But one of the things that I reflect upon is, again, when I was involved in EdTech in a significant way, what I realized actually, when I started this new role, I remember living in London in the summer. You get invited to a number of these receptions, for big moments. And I remember on one evening, I had 3 different invitations. One was from the UK aid agency DFID in Whitehall, where the Secretary of State was bringing together people to discuss EdTech. The second was a publishing company that was talking about EdTech, and they had a lovely rooftop where they are for this drinks reception one evening. And the third was a VC incubator type of organization that in a very cool and hip part of East London, had their annual party. And so I decided that I'd go to the UK government event first. And when I went there, I saw a number of the same actors that I'd been interacting with when I used to run a foundation. And these were policy people, these were politicians, these were people from other foundations, people from the policy world, but not one EdTech entrepreneur in the room. Whereas when I went to the rooftop in Dalston, I found this most incredible, vibrant, young, hip, loud party where it was like, 100, 200 entrepreneurs, startup entrepreneurs in the EdTech field, and not one policy person, not one person from government. And, if you were to say in terms of if there was a learning that I had, that learning actually came through in abundance that evening, where the two sides simply don't interact. So in that regard, what is it the EdTech Hub is going to do to bridge this artificial divide that exists?
Yeah, I think that's an incredibly good point. And I actually think that's another lesson from this year, because you don't have to go to 2 or 3 separate events anymore. The possibilities of bringing those different people together over platforms like this has also become more possible. But I completely recognize the situation you're talking about. So the EdTech Hub is doing a mixture of things. It will be doing some very academic, at scale, rigorous research, randomized controlled trials, all of that to build the rigorous evidence that we need to get EdTech taken really seriously. But what is absolutely crucial in all of that is to make sure that it doesn't just stay as these big, huge studies that a very limited number of people will ever read. Now, those people it's important that they do see it and that this research exists. But again, I know perfectly well that if you're a Director General of Education in, I don't know, Peshawar, you simply do not have time to be reading even the executive summary of such a study. At best, you will hand it to one of your advisors and you will say, please read that, and please tell me if there is anything I need to worry about in here. And equally, neither that provincial official nor that academic ever really spends very much time with somebody who goes to school every day to teach students. And I think that the few times I've seen it happen, and I would really like us to get some of this going as well at the EdTech Hub, the few times I've seen it happen, when you introduce somebody who goes to a school and teaches every day into a meeting of, officials or academics and ask them to give a story or an anecdote about what it is that they've been doing, that can often transform the whole meeting. So going back to what the EdTech Hub's going to do, we'll be doing the rigorous research on the one hand, but we also have quite a strong mission to make sure that we are translating out the messages of what we're finding out to policymakers and to others delivering education in the field.
And so, Victoria, I want to round out this interview because with a focus on teachers, and I want to drill a little bit into your work with regards to teacher proficiency. What is it that you've learned? What is happening around the world? Do you want to start off with just a comment on what role teachers play in developing these successful models?
Yeah, I mean, I think that teachers, of all the people I know who've had a difficult time this year, I think teachers are, up there with the people who've had it hardest. I have a very good friend who runs a group of schools in the UK, who is always unbelievably cheerful and unflappable and full of energy. And I have never seen her look as tired as she did when I spoke to her on Monday. And I'm really not surprised. So, the first thing I want to say is I applaud any teacher out there still trying to teach. I think EdTech is quite a difficult area for teachers. I think there are lots of fears about EdTech linked to the idea that, maybe somehow technology is going to replace teachers in a sort of futuristic, all children will be taught by sitting at home, looking at a device that will understand magically what they need to learn next. And I think that the research that we've done so far is absolutely unequivocally clear that that is not the case. And the global natural experiment that teachers and their students have been involved in this year has really demonstrated quite clearly that, when you have children at home trying to learn through a screen, having teaching presence in the form of, an adult who is professionally qualified and interested in helping them to learn is actually more important than ever. The other thing I'd say about teachers and EdTech, and this is something that we're looking at really quite closely, is about the use of EdTech in the professional development and training needs of teachers. I think in the past there's been a lot of thought that, it might just be more convenient if teachers did all of their professional development online through various kind of MOOC settings. And again, what my research colleagues at the Hub are telling me is that, it's a much more complicated situation than that. And yes, EdTech and technology applications are part of the solution, but actually face-to-face learning is also important for teachers. And the final thing I will add is that it has also become incredibly clear over the past year that it is vital that teachers get access to professional development that helps them work through how to use these new technologies to the benefit of their students, to the benefit of the learning of their pupils, but also in a way that means that they feel comfortable and confident and able to use these new tools, these new pens and pieces of paper that are put in front of them.
And so there's this view which I fully disagree with, and I want to say that at the beginning, right? That teachers are the obstacles to EdTech adoption in schools. What is your view on that?
I totally disagree with it as well.
So why is it that we haven't seen EdTech take off?
Yeah, I mean, I can understand why many teachers might feel threatened about EdTech because, as I say, there is this rhetoric around that, we can all use technology instead of teachers, and it will be much easier, and we won't have to worry about posting people to remote areas and all of the things that administrators worry about. I can understand why that's threatening. I can also understand why it might be a bit frightening sometimes when you have young students in front of you who find using a smartphone or a laptop or a tablet just easier than you do. And of course it's normal, because if I look at my sister's young children, these are devices they've been familiar with since the day they were born. And certainly I remember in my first job, which was not as a teacher, having a computer on my desktop was a distant dream. Only senior vice presidents had them. So I can see that all of that is frightening. I don't think teachers are the obstacle, though, to these things being in the classroom. I think it's far more complicated than that. There are issues around cost, there are issues around connectivity, and there are issues around the fiscal constraints of many education systems make this very difficult to think through.
Victoria, thank you so much for your time today. And if someone wants to find out more about the work of the EdTech Hub, how do they do so? So you've cited a few research projects. Where do people go and have a look?
You can find all of our published research to date on our website, and the address is edtechhub.org. You can also, and you'll find a link on the website, you can also sign up to receive our monthly newsletter, which is a very light roundup of everything we do that comes out every month or so. And if you're interested in anything you see there, you can always get in touch with us via the website, and we'll do our best to help you.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Victoria. I hope you have a really great break over Christmas and you come back recharged, because the subject that you are so focused on couldn't be of more importance in terms of to make sure that our kids prosper. But you're right to say that a lot more needs to be invested in making sure professional development of teachers actually takes place around the world. So thank you for shining a spotlight on that. And I look forward to future opportunities to have you back on here. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and happy holidays to everybody.
You too.